Aw man, don't you just love it when BPM Sports Talk Radio goes out there with a scoop, an interview, a comment that really gets Canadiens fans excited. Je suis excité, and I know what that means, don't worry, I'm just kind of joking around here, but today what we're doing is going over to some commentary made on April 27th, 2024, so 2 weeks ago on BPM Sports Talk Radio. The guest that they had on the show you might recognize. It's Bob Hartley, former NHL coach, KHL coach, and everything in between. He's a guy with a pretty notable voice in the hockey world, and of course, as a French-speaking dude, he's regularly brought onto these radio shows in Quebec to give his 2 cents onto things around the NHL. And one of the latest clips that has been resurfacing the past few days was one that I thought we needed to talk about in this video. And of course, you already know from the title, from the thumbnail, today we are talking about Montreal Canadiens' 5th overall pick in the 2024 NHL Entry Draft, Ivan Demidov, once more. Because he's a guy with the extended amount of coverage he's been getting in the Russian system, as well as the hype behind his name. There's been no better name to go out there and talk about the future with the Montreal Canadiens than Ivan Demidov. Now, before we get into the comments by Hartley, I know this is going to come up in the comments section below, so I'm just going to go out there and address this at the beginning of the video. Demidov has played 2 more games with SKA St. Petersburg this season, and unfortunately he has scored 0 points. He's only got 1 point in the season so far in 3 games. That was the 1 assist against Metallurg Magnitogorsk. It should be noted, however, that he was on the ice for the first 2 goals of the season for SKA. The next 2 games, though, his ice time was still kind of the same, 13 minutes in the game against Lada Togliatti, and then in the most recent game against Lokomotiv Yaroslavl, he had 10 minutes, so his production did go down a little bit, or not production, but his ice time. He didn't score any points in those 2 games, although the Yaroslavl game was a shutout for SKA, so nobody on the team scored points, and then the Lada Togliatti game was a 3-1 win, so there were 3 goals scored, but Demidov did not score any points on those. His production has slowed down compared to game number 1 of the season, but that's okay. I mean, it's the KHL, right? You can't really expect too many of these young dudes to produce too much like Matvei Mishkov did in the most recent season. But either way, Ivan Demidov is the Montreal Canadiens subject of today's video, a guy who in his previous season with SKA 1946 St. Petersburg had 2 points a game, 30 games played, 60 points, 17 games and 28 points in the playoffs, because what Bob Hartley said on the recent BPM Sports Talk radio show was pretty intriguing, and we're going to go over onto an article published by Elias Adiem that transcribes the quotes in order to get the full scoop. Bob Hartley believes that Ivan Demidov could have been picked ahead of Celebrini in the draft, and he explains why. In this article, there is a link to the video clip published by the BPM Sports crew, and included in the article are the comments made transcribed by Hartley and in English. Without belittling Macklin Celebrini, because I've seen him play and I love him, if Ivan Demidov had the same spotlight as Celebrini, I would not have been surprised to see Demidov go first. Oh boy. I feel like we've had this conversation before, but it is one that I think is worth exploring. This has been discussed at length by different radio shows and podcasts. In particular, I'm pretty sure the Scouching Live podcast talked about this idea more than once, that Macklin Celebrini in the NCAA was phenomenal. He won the Hobey Baker as the best player in college hockey as a freshman. He's only one of 4 freshmen to be able to win the award as such. I believe the other 3 were, what was it, Adam Fantilli, Jack Eichel, and Paul Correa? Something like that. Either way, Macklin Celebrini was so good in the NCAA, scoring himself 64 points in 38 games played. However, Ivan Demidov is a guy with his offensive skill set and just the way he sees the game, the absolute above and beyond hockey IQ and playmaking ability. He's a guy that if he played in the NCAA as well, even as a 17, 18-year-old freshman, I honestly don't know if he would have been that much worse than Celebrini. In fact, I would not be surprised if he if given the same circumstances, the same team, the same caliber of players around him in the same role, I would not be surprised if Demidov maybe even outscored Celebrini. And that's a crazy thing to say because Demidov played in the junior Russian leagues last year. Celebrini was in the NCAA against men for the most part. There's a reason why it's so rare to see a freshman win the Hobey Baker. Firstly, because freshmen are rarely good enough to do it, and secondly, because freshmen are freshmen. They're not usually given the opportunities to do that well in the first place. So for Celebrini to cement himself in history with Jack Eichel, Adam Fantilli, and Paul Kariya, I mean, it's great company to keep, of course, but for Ivan Demidov, I have this strange feeling that if he was given that NCAA spotlight, I don't necessarily disagree with Bob Hartley's assessment that he might have been even better. However, this is what Hartley goes out there and says. SKA will do everything in their power to keep the young player after this season, even though it was already discussed by the SKA folks that they want to prioritize Demidov's development. They want to give him this opportunity to learn and get better. For Montreal, the KHL was created to compete with the NHL, and the Russian hockey brass does not like seeing young top players go to North America. So, will there be a charm offensive to try and sign him long term? Don't be surprised. I'm not saying he will sign, but I'm convinced that SKA will try hard. And this relates to the conversation about Macklin Celebrini because, of course, Celebrini is going to play in the NHL this upcoming year. He'll probably be the first-line center in San Jose. It's almost like it was meant to be, right? A Vancouver guy who eventually moves to the Bay Area because his dad works for the Golden State Warriors. He gets familiar with that area, he gets familiar with that team, he becomes a Sharks fan, and then he eventually gets drafted first overall by them. They're terrible in the previous season, they needed a first-line center, they got one in Celebrini. I'm not saying that Celebrini is going to be guaranteed to getting 80 points or whatever, but like, playing on a first-line role with Tyler Toffoli and Will Smith, there's a lot of good going on for Celebrini, and it's going to carry over from his BU days in the NCAA. He was given that opportunity right off the bat in college to be a top guy. Now he's getting that in the NHL as well. So even though I do think there is a semblance of truth to the idea that if you set everything equally, if you put Celebrini in the MHL, he might have actually had a lower draft stock. If you put Demidov in the NCAA, he may have had a higher draft stock. I kind of do believe those ideas just because of the styles of play that these guys exhibit. Celebrini as a do-it-all, two-way caliber center wouldn't really thrive in the KHL's junior league as much as the NCAA, mostly because in the MHL, the ice is bigger, and there's a lot more rewarding play for guys that know how to take that initiative offensively and just step up, take control with some BDE, and just totally dominate offensively. I'm not saying that Macklin Celebrini can't do that, I'm just saying that his game is a lot more well-rounded and a lot more suitable for defensive situations and overall stability everywhere. In the MHL, you don't really need that, and as a result, I think it's allowed a guy like Ivan Demidov to focus only on his offense. Not saying that he's a slouch defensively, but like, Demidov has needed to cultivate that attack-first mentality, that drive to the middle, drive to the net, and just do everything you can. Nifty move, fancy dangle, puck through the legs, and then make a beautiful pass to create scoring chances and just attack, attack, attack. Demidov is so cerebral and he's so smart that I think if he was given a stage in the NCAA instead of the MHL, it would have been a lot easier for scouts to acknowledge, hey, this guy has a really crazy, bizarre skill set that works and is super effective at creating offense. I mean, we had talked about this in the Ivan Demidov first KHL game video earlier this week, or last week, excuse me. But there was a play in Demidov's first KHL game where he was breaking into the zone, he had no options, he was getting closed in by a defender, so what does he do? He sauces the puck off the boards to himself to get around the defender and then go towards the net. Like, that kind of crazy offensive creative stuff is not really in Macklin Celebrini's repertoire. And we've seen it before with guys like Ken Johnson and Trevor Zegras that because guys that are super skilled get a spotlight in the NCAA, if they're able to showcase those skills and get points in the process, it bolsters their draft stock. So for Ivan Demidov, I have no doubt, honestly, that if he was given that stage, he could have been maybe a top 3, top 2 pick. Maybe even number 1, as Bob Hartley says. So I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Do you agree or disagree about Bob Hartley's assessment here on Demidov maybe even being a number 1 caliber guy? But of course, woulda, coulda, shoulda, he was number 5, Celebrini was 1. That's what we gotta live with now, isn't it? Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. 9 and bye.